All right, it looks like we're recording. So my talk today, it's kind of informal-ish, but my whole goal today was wanting to talk about bridging the gap between academia and industry. Uh, Most people want to hear, hey, how do I get a job at a big company? I want my dream job, right? That's why we're in college is to get a job for the future. So uh, my journey started, I guess, when I was little. I was messing around with um, a Commodore 64 to play some of the games that my dad had. We didn't know how to work it, but I knew I loved computers. High school, I took my options in Atlantic City for courses to take. They were C++ or A+. A plus hardware technician, C plus plus obviously programming, and I didn't know the difference. So I knew I liked computers a lot. So C plus plus must be better because there's another plus. Um, and as silly as that was, I mean that's kind of how my whole journey began, um, because of an extra plus symbol. So I ended up going to Florida State, and obviously I was there for a long time. Um, so I guess the first part of the journey was all about networking. You hear a lot of times people say, sometimes it's not about what you know, but who you know. And I mean that's really true. We've had some students, actually they're students now at Florida State trying to interview to get a job, and when I had my mentor came last year and gave a talk, and I think that was the part that ticked my friend off the most because he's like, oh, it's about what you know. Well, after he's trying to get an interview, it was really difficult for him, and he was recommended through his network. And I mean, lucky for all of us, we're in a network already, right? We're at Florida State. We know people, we have alumni, faculty are a great resource. So the interesting part about networking sometimes is you never know, right? Who should I connect with? Who should I maintain relationships? And I mean, the answer for that is really just everybody. Because it's not, sure, it's about the relationships you make and you maintain, but it's also that skill of networking, right? You're going to change your network soon. You're going to graduate from Florida State. You're going to go on to something else. And having that skill to be able to make new friends, make new connections, I mean, that's going to carry with you the entire time. That's for your entire life. So you may make a bunch of friends at Florida State, leave and graduate and never talk to them again. But because you have that experience in networking, I mean, that's going to make your life easier going down the road. So now we network, we know somebody. Now we're trying to get a job. So I definitely recommend starting while you're an undergrad. Internships are huge. I have a little Microsoft page up here. So this is the Microsoft's career page. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. Just search, careers in Microsoft. They have a breakdown. All big companies are usually like this. They have a general hiring. Microsoft broke it down with students and grad home. But what you'll see when you look for a job offer is a lot of places have a student section of their website and then a regular industry section of the website. And I think everybody's looked over this and they're like, oh, I'll take whatever job I can get. Let me apply to anything. And that doesn't really work. You'll see a lot of senior positions, and everybody that I've known was hopeful that they can get a senior position at a high school, or excuse me, at a college, but that quite didn't work out for them. So get an internship. That's probably the best thing I can say as far as wanting to get in a different route. As far as myself, so my first internship was actually with a private defense contractor. My brother worked in Oklahoma City at this company called Air Inc., Aeronautical Radio Incorporated, and they worked on some contracts for the Air Force. Well, he ended up helping me out with the internship, putting me in contact with, the people, and they actually created the internship for me. Um, is funny because the resume that I gave them, when I looked at the actual internship, like the description, it was posted after I had given them my resume. Because they had to do HR stuff and make the job just for me, or open up the job, and the job literally was just for me. When I look at the write-up, it was literally copied and pasted from my resume, which I guess brings me to my next point. So once you get networking, once you get in, and a recruiter finally is starting talking to you at a company that you want to work for, or a company you want to try out, I mean, your resume is pretty much your next big stop. Once you give them your resume, you need that recruiter to call you back. Now, what people don't tell you a lot of times, right, is recruiters, I mean, in my experience, have been, a shot in the dark. They can either be good, they can either be bad. They're almost always female, which is a whole other discussion. There's, a lack of females in the tech industry that gets a lot of press, but what doesn't get a lot of press is the lack of males in the recruiting industry. But I guess that's just the way it goes. So this recruiter that knows nothing about programming is trying to give you a programming job, which is crazy when you think about it. Oh yeah, the stuff's on my resume, but they're really looking for keywords. I've had my brother, he's been in tech writing for 20 years. He does drafting with AutoCAD stuff. And we tried to get him a tech writing position, here, Google, Amazon, any of the big companies, and they had tech writing positions open. And he had lots of experience. He has managed teams. He took lead roles and stuff. But the problem was his resume was not up to date, or wasn't what they were looking for, right? So he didn't have the keywords. He didn't have, agile programming, some of the programming languages on his resume. And with 20 years of experience trying to get an entry-level tech job at a big company, he got 0 callbacks. So the best thing to pad your resume that I found is, do stuff, right? So with resume writing, there's 2 pitfalls. You either put too much or you put too little. And really, obviously, the ideal is just enough, which is coming out of college, 1 page. So, at Florida State, though, you guys have, you're ahead of the curve, man. There's so many opportunities to write apps, publish apps, get involved with groups, and put stuff on your resume to stand out, right? It's all about standing out at this point. You need a callback. So let's say your resume is top notch, you get a callback, then what? So typically what happens is you have a couple phone calls, a couple phone screenings. You have a phone screening with the interviewer, or with the recruiter, which is just kind of a high level gloss over, making sure the person generally fits. Then you start interviewing with the real devs and the real engineers. And you've heard a lot about Google's interview process being strict. I've been on the Microsoft interview process. I went on the Google interview process. And they're all kind of different. So the interview process that I had for my first internship was pretty easy. They needed somebody. I knew somebody. They got me in, and that was pretty much that. Well, that job, that experience, next summer led to me working at Florida State at the engineering building for something called traffic and criminal software. I did something with RS-232 GPS, and they were like, hey, we're using RS-232 GPS, like we need a GPS plugin. And I was like, yeah, sure, no problem. Right? I still had RS-232 experience, right? That doesn't mean I still don't even know really what RS-232 is. It's some system configuration for some GPS, whatever. I'm programming. I'm just using the API calls for me. But because I did it before, I can do it again, and it made me that much more confident. After your first internship, you really shed that helplessness feeling. I've seen a lot of students, they they get put in a position and they get stuck on a problem. You're always broken in computer science. Like you're what you're working on, it's in a perpetual state of being broke. Because when it's not broken, you code enough on it till it breaks again, and then you're stuck on a problem. So that's been the whole flow of computer science is just being stuck and how to unstick yourself. And once you take that first experience, then you really start to find answers for yourself. Depend on it. If you have somebody to ask, or you have a search engine to ask, like, you got to rely on that search engine first. Because at school you can kind of spread it around, friends, they're all your friends, you're like, oh, whatever, like it's no big deal. But when you're having to bother your manager, your tech lead, your mentor, then you start looking for answers out there. And once you build these relationships, you can kind of guess what people say. If I go to somebody, if I go to my manager and tell them, hey, I'm stuck on this problem, or this is what I did. I mean, if you don't have a general idea of what they're going to say next, that can hurt you a lot. So if I go to my manager and say, hey, look, I'm having a problem checking something in, I'm blocked on somebody, my manager's going to come and tell me, oh, well, why don't you look at what's blocking them and try to fix it. So why even ask that person in the first place? Just go ahead and do what they're going to say. And you gain that experience with your first internship. So moving on, I did the Air Inc. I did the little thing at Florida State. And then I ended up getting an internship at Google. One of our alum there was working at Google at the time. We're still working at Google. Ended up hooking him up for an interview. And by that point, I had a bunch of experience with Android programming, with Mobile Lab. I had a couple papers under my belt, a couple apps published on the App Store. And I was ready for the interview. And it was an internship interview, which are generally a lot easier than full-time interviews. Not all the time, but in general, it's a little bit easier to get in through an internship. So after Google, it was a startup in Jacksonville. That interview process was really easy, smaller companies. I just basically gave him my portfolio, and he was like, yeah, sure, when can you start? And then I ended up here at Microsoft on an internship also. So now you have your company on-site scheduled. That can be pretty stressful. So my internship for Microsoft, it was actually a full day's worth of interviews. It was like my Google interviews for full-time, only for an internship position. And usually, it's nice. They fly you out here. They make travel plans for you. They put you up in a hotel, and you try not to stress out. The biggest pitfall about tech interviews, and I will state this again, the biggest pitfall with tech interviews is you will bomb your first interview. Done deal. Just know you will bomb your first interview. So the best advice for that is make sure your first interview is at a job that you do not want. It's funny how that happens, but my first tech interview was at a career fair at Florida State with Microsoft, and I tanked it. They asked me a lowest common ancestor problem, and I just couldn't get it, right? I knew it after I walked out the door and walked down the street, and I'm like, oh, stuff started clicking. You beat yourself up about it, but that's just the way it is. Like, what ends up happening was I ended up bombing that interview and waking myself up, and then a month later was my Google interview that was good enough to land me an internship offer. This happens. I've seen this happen at least a half dozen times. Friend has an interview at Apple. He's a huge Apple fanboy. His first interview is at Apple. His on-site Apple tanked. Another friend, right? Like, same thing happened. At NVIDIA was their dream job, and that didn't go so well. So make sure that you prepare for that tech interview. kind of let some air out the head and kind of float down from the clouds, because once you get that interview, I mean, that's only the start. You really, really need to prepare for that. Um, so that's kind of my big talk with interviews. There's so many books out there. Programming Interviews Exposed is a good book. Hacking the Programming Interview. And most of the questions are almost always algorithm questions. I went to Google and Microsoft. They asked me pretty much the same kind of questions, right? They describe a problem. I mean, pretty much the ACM programming contest questions. If you can do good in the ACM programming contest, then you should be fine interviewing. And that's actually true. We had a student from there that nailed the programming contest every year by himself, and now he's at Google too. So maybe you guys know who that is. Josh looks like it knows who he is. But but so you nailed. Now you got the interview. You're out there. You nailed the interview, and now you got an offer. What does that offer look like? How much is it worth? I mean, those are huge questions that you never feel comfortable. You never really feel comfortable with, right? Until you actually have that experience. So companies differ, obviously. Startups differ. I mean, startups will promise you a lot of stock, so you can get rich quick on all the stock that they promise you. Startups weren't really my flavor. I worked at a couple, and I prefer the big company, instead of a wing and a prayer. Maybe our stock will go public. Maybe we'll tank. Probably tank. So that was always worryful. But I mean, the big thing with picking a company is, you really need to like the company, right? Like, and internships help you infinitely in going into the company and trying it out. So big companies usually offer you a couple things. They'll offer you a base salary. They'll offer you stock awards. They have a benefits package put together, and they'll usually offer you some type of cash sign-on bonus, and then a relocation package, where small companies may only give you stock options, and really no benefits package. So what is a good offer? Well, I mean, it depends where you go, right? Like, starting offers in Microsoft, I mean, starting offers are around 105. I've seen some of the new interns get hired in at around 105. Which, by the way, the industry does not care about your graduate degree. I love grad school and definitely opened up a lot of doors. If you're able to get a job with just your bachelor's, I mean, lucky you, go for it. You reached, a pretty good milestone to jump to industry. But the majority of us won't have job offers by the time we have our undergrad. So I would recommend going to grad school. That's what I did. I stayed at Florida State. People are like, oh, yeah, you did all this school, it's such a good job. I mean, no, like, I was just lazy. Like, in the grand scheme of things, I didn't want to work. I wanted to stay at Florida State. I wanted to continue watching football games. So I'm like, 4 years wasn't enough. What do I do? I guess I'll just stay for grad school. Like, it's the same thing I'm already doing now. And that's what happened. Grad school, with the extra time, opened up more internships, got more experience, and I mean, it built an overall, more well-rounded me, which I guess is the whole point of school. They want a well-rounded person. Well, you stay there long enough, you learn a thing or two. If I can do school again, it'd probably be a lot easier this time. That's just the way it is. So, like I said, the starting offers for Microsoft were around 105. I mean, I had an internship and graduate degrees, and I barely came out more than what the base interns were making. So I've heard offers at Google around, mid 120s. That's kind of a starting offer. And this number, I mean, obviously it changes over time. I've had my mentor when he got a job 5 years ago at Microsoft. I mean, and his starting salary was around 80. So they try to keep up to date, but that's kind of the general range that you're looking for, or not that you may not be looking for it, but that's the general range you're going to get if you end up at a big company. Smaller companies, like I said, are probably going to be around, depending where they're at, 60. I know Tallahassee will pay, like, some of their senior devs in Tallahassee are at 60 to 80, and it's just cost of living. A lot of startups in California are in the Valley will start you around 80, which is not much in California. So you have your base salary now, which is your lifeblood, right? They always say get your base as high as possible. Your bonuses are going to be a percentage of your base. Your promotions are going to be a percentage of your base. So, I mean, that's what you want higher. But say you also want stock awards, right? So those kind of vest, like the general idea about stock awards is they told me, hey, we're going to give you around like $50,000 in stock, and it's going to vest over 3.5 years. So that means if I stay with the company 3.5 years, I get that amount of stock. But the way they do it is a little bit tricky. All companies are different, but I know Google and Microsoft work this way. On your start date, they say, okay, whatever the stock price is, Microsoft says, was at $40. As soon as you start, they say, okay, we told you we were going to give you $50,000 in stock. Then when you start, they set aside that stock for you. They buy it all right there for you and set it aside, and then give it to you over 3.5 years, piece by piece. I got it quarter after 6 months, and then I'll get the other 3 quarters every year after that. And it's basically just, here's the stock transfer that we already have. If the stock price goes up since I started, then I make money. If it goes down, I lose money. So a lot of companies, you want to get started early with that. Google offers pretty much around the same. I mean, so you're looking around 40 to 50 grand in stock options at stock awards at one of these big companies. The next part of the offer package is the benefits, kind of just the overall. Most all companies that are pretty big, I mean, they're going to give you health, so hopefully the healthcare is pretty good. I haven't really needed much healthcare, so I don't know the extent of that, but I mean, I know they give the package. Then you have all the other stuff, all the other perks, like, oh, do they have a bus drive you to work? Do they give you a bus pass? Do they have a gym on campus? And that just kind of varies company to company, but it's really nice being able to, like, just go get a drink from the fridge, or get reimbursement for gym or something like that. So that's, that you'll hear that in the company culture. So you'll hear this thing about, oh, well, what's the culture of the company? And it's like, it's the general mindset that they're in. And believe it or not, like, the culture is way different between Microsoft and Google. You would think, they're big companies, they're pretty the same, but the vibe is, it's a lot different, right? It's like, walking into I don't even know how to describe it. It's like, two different fraternities. Like, they're way different, but they're both kind of bro-ish, you know what I mean? Like, but so that's kind of the culture. And then the last thing you have is cash offer. I mean, that can be anywhere between 5 to 30 grand. I know Amazon does a super big they do super big stock and super big cash sign-on that's like has all these strings attached to keep you at the company for a long time. So that's kind of the whole offer. And if you guys, feel free to contact me if you have an offer or you want some advice on, what you think it looks like, but at the end of the day, it's what makes you happy, right? So if you're at a company, if you can choose company A or company B, and you really love company A, but the only difference is company B is paying you what, even if it's $10,000 more, like it doesn't at that point it doesn't really matter, right? Because I mean, you got your dream job, you got a company you're going to be happy working for, you're going to be working for them every day. So at that point, like, what's a few $1,000s? I mean, it sounds like a lot in college, but at the grand scheme of things, like I just moved out here where I'm still broke, and I work at Microsoft because I'm still trying to get out of the college phase, and I had no furniture, no this, no that, so all the money I've been getting, I've been spending on moving expenses and fixing up my place and getting not a crummy apartment that used to be a hotel, like getting some real stuff. So a lot of things come attached with the job offer, obviously. Pretty much everything that I've seen is people take the first offer. Hey, I just got an offer from Google. I'm just going to go ahead and take it. And that's what companies want you to do. They want you to be like, oh, well, I'm done interviewing. But you don't have to do that. Maybe you did get your dream offer, maybe you didn't. But, I mean, I would still recommend interviewing at a couple other companies, because at the least, it'll make you feel better about the offer you're taking. There's nothing worse than doubt, especially it's like, you could have went to FSU or you could have went to another college. Like, think about how your life would have been different if you ended up at that different college. It's kind of hard to imagine, but it would have been way different. So make sure you're sure about accepting that offer. Then you have all the fun with moving out here, getting on a team, and I'll leave that for you guys to explore. But the next kind of big thing I want to talk about is everything that I've had to do at Florida State, or excuse me, everything I had to do in industry that I didn't learn at Florida State. Mainly writing a lot of code. Sure, we're all computer science and we write code, but like when you work and your job's to sit at a desk and straight pump out code, it can be a huge adjustment. Believe it or not, like code versioning systems, like I think everybody's probably heard about Git, but like, do you use it all the time for your projects, for your homework assignments? Are you using Git, or do you just like open your computer up and the code's there? That's something that I can't stress enough, that how much we have to use in industry that like we know about in college, but nobody ever forces us to use it. I had when Ted Baker was teaching, he was the one that was like, oh yeah, put your assignments up in, just submit it to Git. And that was awesome. That gave me a huge leg up when I got here. Like I already knew I had a general idea at least of how to submit code, how to get these code reviews and version myself. So we just had Zach join the call. I'll introduce Zach a little bit later. Maybe he can give us a few departing words. But the next big thing that Florida State doesn't prepare you for at all, or college in general, is estimating the amount of time that you need to do something. So we have these things called iterations, sprints. They can call it sprints, iterations, cycles, whatever they're called. They're the general idea of this agile programming model, which is, okay, we have a month. Let's figure out what we can do in this month and how long these tasks that we want to do are going to take. And that's something that FSU or college doesn't really do. You have a deadline and you have an assignment, so I'm going to wait n-1 days to start the assignment, which is usually the night before, and you cram on the work. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It's good enough for maybe a C. Well, there are no C's in industry. It's either an A or like you need to go find another person. There is no, when you ship a product to especially the caliber of Microsoft, Google that's reaching millions, there's no like, oh, well, maybe nobody will find this bug that I know about. I just hopefully my TA doesn't hit enter after that command. It doesn't work that way when millions of people are using your code. So cost estimation and task breakdown, I mean, is something that I'm still ramping up on. And we use Team Foundation Server, Visual Studio Online. So there's Microsoft tools. Google used Git and Garrett to kind of do. They use Bugger also. So there's just kind of task estimation and trying to break down fine-grained deliverables, right? So like, hey, I'm not going to do the first half of the program, right? The first half of my algorithms assignment is to do whatever. You need to define this whole assignment consists of X number of pieces. Those pieces are going to take X number of days or X number of hours, and then you kind of, if you broke it down like that, I guarantee you a lot less people would procrastinate in school because they would be like, oh man, like I really don't have a lot of time to do this. On a side note for that, the number one thing that I've seen for new hires is in college students is you always underestimate the amount of time to do something. And when I mean like by less than or by more than double. So, if I think something's going to take 3 days, it's probably going to take like over a week to do. And you run into a lot of developer roadblocks. You have meetings, you have emails, that you spin up on, and all those things you have to take into account. But that's something you don't. You can go downstairs in the basement of the Love Building and sit there by yourself and not have to communicate with anybody about the program. And it can be done and fine, but when you come to the industry, like it doesn't work that way. There's a good talk called The Myth of the Genius Programmer. It was actually a Google I/O talk, and that was basically shedding the myth that there's no Oracle kid, there's no protege, right? You guys seen Grandma's Boy? They have that kid who is like the rock star programmer. He can just lock himself in his basement and eat a bunch of Doritos and drink Mountain Dew and come out with the next big game. Like, bro, that doesn't happen. Like, I would like to meet that person because I would join their startup maybe. But it just doesn't happen that way. So we have task management and we have versioning software. And I guess probably the next big thing to kind of round out skills, and this is something Microsoft's going through a lot right now, is testing your code. I don't think I wrote one. No, let me rephrase that. In the 10 years that I was at FSU, like, I wrote no unit tests. I had no reason to test anything. If I wanted to test something, like, maybe I would redirect some input to the file, right? Like, a lot of the C++ programs, I'm sure Josh has done this a lot too, like, hey, this is the input, 1, 2, 3, I'm going to run it through the program, and we're going to see if I get the right output. And a lot of the base programming classes, like, that's just what you do. You've wasted so much time rerunning that program and putting in that same key sequence. Like, when you think about how much time was burned on that, like, it's pretty sickening. Where you could have just wrote a little piece of code and just ran all those tests and, hey, it worked. And at Microsoft now, I'm sure you guys heard in the news, like, there's huge layoffs, this, that, massive reorgs. But something that they're doing is all the engineers now, all the devs are responsible for writing test code. First, what does that even mean? How does that even work? How do you write good tests? I mean, once you start writing some tests, it totally progresses your mindset on how you approach problems, how you organize data structures, how you gather information and index it. It totally changes things. So that takes me to about where I'm at now in my career, which is, from college, going through that whole process we talked about into into the workforce and trying to climb the ladder. I see we have Zach on the call. I don't know if Zach, we have about maybe 10 minutes. If you have any words of wisdom for progressing kind of after this entry point to later in your career.
Well, thank you for the introduction, Frank. For those on the call, I'm not sure if Frank mentioned that I would be joining. I'm a lead program manager working with Frank, and my team is responsible for defining the requirements for the product. We represent the customer, we run the project, and we go to a lot of meetings. Is really what we do. So, actually, what I was sort of hoping that we might do today is hear some of your questions and thoughts. I mean, the best thing that that I can do is tell you about my personal perspective, but it will be more valuable if it's seen through your own viewpoint.
All right. So I guess the whole room's rigged up with mics. I guess we'll just take the last 10 minutes and kind of do a little QA to see what you guys want to know. I definitely recommend taking advantage. We have Zach on the phone call, and he's been at Microsoft for a while and definitely has found ways to make those connections and those relationships and networks that we talked about to benefit from that. So
Yes, I'll ask the first question.
sure.
Which would you say helped you more, learning techniques and processes or specific technologies? Like, would you recommend studying more like algorithms and kind of broad general principles that you can put into practice, or actually working with like web frameworks or like Android development, specific technologies?
Do you want to field that one, Zach, or you want me to field it?
I'm interested in your perspective.
Okay, so I mean, I guess the answer for that, right, is it's kind of a balance. So the big thing, obviously, to be like the rock star programmer is you have to have that foundation of data structures. Just to be able to sit down at a meeting and somebody can tell you, oh yeah, well, we have the entitlement cache is in a hash table, and we use that index and pass it to these guys, and they have their structure in some sort of array. And just having the high level pieces helps you conceptually understand things and put things together. And obviously it's needed for the interview and to kind of get this high level. But what I've really found that slows you down the most, I've been told by my manager, right, like in order to get your first promotion to bump levels and stuff, you really need to have a high code velocity. So what does it mean to have a high code velocity? Sure, it's pumping out a bunch of good code, but how do you pump out good code? Well, having all those good estimates and the task and organization, like I mentioned earlier, but it's how not to block yourself. So having that experience with working on the web frameworks, working on the the Android platform or whatever, it's knowing that, damn, in Eclipse, if I edit a resource file and I don't clean, like, it's not going to build correctly. And in Visual Studio, we use Visual Studio for everything. That program is so powerful. There's so many little checkboxes that I can spend a day blocked on something, and then I ask somebody, and they're just like, oh yeah, click, click. You just had to link instead of statically link, dynamically link libraries. And I'm like, oh man, like, A, I would never figure that out. B, I wasted a bunch of time already. And C, like, that was so dumb. I can't believe I was even blocked on that. Now, the issue with working with these platforms instead of studying algorithms is, I guarantee you, your job, whatever, you can have a bunch of experience in something, you are not going to be using it like the industry's using it. So you can know it's like, what tool should I know how to use? I mean, I don't know. It doesn't matter. The answer is like probably the wrong tool. whatever tool you're going to pick, you're not going to be using it either. You're not going to be using it, and B, you're probably not going to be using it the way that the industry is using it. So, coming out of school.
Brian, just a quick thing. You have 5 minutes.
Okay, coming out of school, I mean, I would focus on the algorithms part, be familiar with a lot of platforms, but wait until you actually are forced to use something to master that tool, and keep yourself unblocked. I guess that's kind of my general spiel on that.
Yeah, that sounds pretty good. I would just add that when I started my career, it was very important to know how to employ the techniques and processes that would produce product, like immediately produce product. So I needed to be a great C programmer, and I needed to be able to do it in ways that were clean and collaborative and durable. But over time, I actually found that the learning that I had from algorithms and even some of my more advanced classes, genetic algorithms and genetic programming, things like that, I found that those pay dividends. So, when you first start out, very tactical, execution focused, but it's really important to have that grounding as you grow in your career.
We probably have time for one more question, maybe two if they're quick.
Any questions?
During the interview, do recruiters maybe ask you to do a quick code segment, or maybe the developer interviewers might ask you to do some small module or something like that? Do they really stress on that? Or?
Yes, definitely. So the recruiters won't ask you because, like I said, the recruiters, they don't know. And don't ever be afraid to hound a recruiter down. Like, sometimes they don't email, sometimes they're late. So if you have a recruiter, don't ever be afraid to abuse that recruiter. And I say that, and I mean that, because guaranteed in another year or two, that recruiter is not even going to be at that company. They change so many hands, so don't even worry about. Just shake that recruiter as hard. Shake the recruiter tree. Shake it till it rains apples. So don't even worry about that. But the interview questions that I've gotten have all been algorithm questions. They've all been simple, not simple, but they all been fundamental algorithm questions. It boils down to, is it a binary tree? Is it a linked list? Is it a hash table? Pretty much it. Is it one of those three things? Every interview question I've ever gotten boiled down to it being a hash table, a linked list, or an array. So, like I said, there's a couple good books, Programming Interviews Exposed and Cracking the Coding Interview, that can really help you with that. But like I said before, go out and get an interview with the job that you don't want, so you can see for yourself what they're asking, and it'll just make you feel more confident. So, we probably have time for one more.
Thank you so much. Let's thank the speaker.
All right. Well, thanks again. The meeting's going to be recorded. I'll post it on the mobile site. I'll give it to ACM. They can post it. And my contact information is pretty easy to get. mobile.cs.fsu.edu. I'm still linked into that. So feel free to reach out and contact me. And I want to thank Zach again for joining on and giving some perspective to things.
Yeah, thank you all for having me.
So let's thank Zach and